Greetings, my name is Monty Martin.
And I'm Kelly McLaughlin.
And we are the Dungeon Dudes. And welcome to Kraken Week.
It's like Shark Week for TTRPG content creators, where a bunch of channels unite to deliver themed content surrounding the Kraken or Seafaring adventures or anything of that sort.
Yeah, so we've gotten aquatic with the likes of D4 Deep Dive, Colby, Ginny D, Pointy Hat, D&D Shorts, Pack Tactics, Indestructible, Bob World Builder, Runesmith, Treant Monk, and so many, many more who are all joining the fun.
This is our effort to build a community and bring people together across the wider TTRPG space. So look for all the wonderful creators we will be sharing this week through our social media and other sources.
Now, as we were thinking about what we would discuss for Kraken Week, we thought about how shocking it is how underprepared the typical D&D adventuring party can be for underwater and seafaring adventures.
A lot of players wrongfully assume that all that they need is water breathing and they can call it a day.
But even if you can breathe underwater, you might not realize how much of a disadvantage, literally, you have when facing underwater creatures like the Kraken.
So today we're going to discuss the rules you need to remember, the threats to be aware of, and the arsenal of options available for you to claim the high seas.
There's a lot to discuss, so let's get rolling. This week's episode of our show is sponsored by World Anvil, which you can sign up for at worldanvil.com.
World Anvil is desktop software that helps you out with world building, writing, and game mastering. It allows you to create amazing wiki-style presentations of your world and help you out with your writing.
Whether you're running D&D 5e or a whole bunch of other supported systems, World Anvil is the best way to create a digital game master's binder that you can then share piece by piece with your players. You can create custom timelines, maps, so that you could totally envision your entire campaign across time and space.
Not only are over 45 systems supported, but you can actually create your own systems in World Anvil. And it provides solutions for GMs to plan, play, and present their adventures and campaigns.
And for players, you got great character management tools with your character sheets, journals, inventories, spell books, everything all kept in place so that you can stay organized as much as your dungeon master is, with all those bells and whistles. It's also a great tool for any writers out there that might be aspiring to write their own fantasy novel or more so that they can really plan their plot lines and publish their work.
So head on over to worldanvil.com to get started with this amazing software. And now, on to this week's episode.
Okay, so kicking things off, let's refresh ourselves by diving in to the rules and figure out what we need to remember about underwater combat.
One of the most important rules to remember is that attacking underwater actually works differently than attacking normally. When making an attack with a melee weapon, if you don't have a swimming speed, you have disadvantage on the attack roll unless the weapon is a dagger, javelin, short sword, spear, or trident.
Now, this is even worse for ranged weapons. Those weapons automatically miss a target beyond the weapon's normal range, and even within your normal range, you have disadvantage unless you're shooting a crossbow, net, or something that is thrown like a javelin or a trident or a dart. And this is not something that changes if you have a swimming speed. So your underwater characters that have swim speeds, they're shooting longbows, you want to switch those out for crossbows.
Now, also keep in mind that creatures that are fully submerged in the water have resistance to fire damage. This is great if you're fighting a red dragon, but it's not so great if your wizard wants to cast fireball.
It's also worth noting that in most cases, water is considered difficult terrain for creatures that don't have a swim speed, so your movement is usually halved when you're swimming. It's even worse because you can drown. A creature can hold their breath for a number of minutes equal to 1 plus their constitution modifier. So for most adventurers, this is really, really generous, adding up to like 3 or 4 minutes. And there isn't even a rule that says you have to breathe in first. It's just the moment you get underwater, you've got 4 minutes.
Usually at my table, if a creature doesn't breathe in first, I jump right to the next section of the rule and I skip the minutes of being able to hold your breath. And I say that they can survive for a number of rounds equal to their constitution modifier. If it runs out of rounds at the start of its next turn, it drops to 0 hit points and is now dying. And it can't regain hit points or be stabilized until it can breathe again.
It's also worth remembering that if you take damage when you're holding your breath, there's no rule that says you have to make a con save to keep holding your breath at all. So characters underwater are actually surprisingly capable when it comes to holding their breath.
Yeah,
because
I can
you
hold my
just
breath for maybe 40 seconds.
Yeah, but no, D&D characters, you got a con 14 or 16, you got 3 to 4 minutes, and even if you're getting stabbed and poked and shot and being thrashed around violently by the Kraken, you're hunky-dory when it comes to your breath.
Now, I don't know, I've gone swimming a lot, and I don't know if anybody's ever got stuck in an undertow, not to a deadly degree, but it becomes scary very quickly.
Yeah.
So I think that it's actually interesting how easy of a time they have it, which is why my house rule at the table is that if you don't get to hold your breath and you're just grabbed and plunged underwater, you're right to the amount of rounds that equal your constitution modifier.
That can be pretty scary, so it's worth discussing with your table if you're going to do house rules like con saves to keep holding your breath when you take damage, or having a requirement that you do have to get that gasp of air in order to hold your breath for the full duration, because if you do apply those, they can be very, very punishing. Another thing that is not clear in the rules is how spellcasting works underwater. Now, we know the rules are very explicit that all creatures that are fully submerged in water have resistance to fire damage, so they take half damage from fireballs even if they fail their saves. But verbal components are an essential part of many, many spells. And verbal components require you to be able to intonate clearly the pitch and resonance necessary to set the spell in motion. And the rules for verbal components state that if you are somehow gagged or in the area of a silence spell, you can't cast spells with verbal components. Now, water isn't a silence spell, and water isn't a gag, but in order to speak, most people need to be able to breathe. And so the rules are completely silent on what happens if you are a spellcaster who is underwater, who cannot breathe underwater, who then decides to cast a spell with a verbal component.
It's interesting because I don't know if you're anything like me. When we were kids, you would go underwater and try to say a sentence to each other and see if you could understand what the other person was saying. But after that one sentence, you're done. Like, you're out of air.
Yeah.
So it is interesting that there's an argument, and this is why it's so unclear. There's an argument to be made that you can go underwater and speak a command word for a spell, but does that diminish your ability to hold your breath? Also, can you say it with enough resonance that it triggers a spell? This is where the rules of spellcasting become very foggy, and the actual fantasy of what it means to cast a spell is really up to a lot of interpretation here.
Yeah, so the way we see it, there's 4 possible interpretations. The first one is really, really punishing, and we would never recommend this to anybody, which is that you just can't cast spells with verbal components underwater, period.
And the other option, which is probably not the right choice and is way too forgiving, is that, yes, anybody can cast any spells underwater.
And it doesn't impact your ability to hold your breath at all somehow, which to us doesn't make sense. What we generally roll with at our tables, and what we recommend to everyone else out there, is that if a monster or a creature or a character is able to breathe underwater through magic or through an innate ability, they can cast spells just fine underwater. And if you can't breathe underwater, you can cast a spell, but you're now no longer holding your breath, and you're down to the running out of breath point.
Also, Pack Tactics is doing an entire video on water-based combat for Kraken Week, so make sure to check out their video as well if you want more information about that. Now, if you are setting out for a seafaring, water-bound adventure, there are some major threats to be aware of. First of all, a lot of aquatic creatures have tentacles that can grapple you, or are capable of swallowing you whole. So when you're designing your characters and thinking about your abilities and gear, make sure that you have the tools to escape these horrible situations.
Underwater combat is weirdly like aerial combat without the falling part, but instead you've got drowning. And so with underwater combat, a lot of aquatic creatures move much faster than player characters, even those that do have swim speeds. And they have the ability with these grapples to pull you underwater. My favorite Kraken tactic is grabbing a player and holding them underwater so that they are in risk of drowning. And so having the ability to break out of grapples, having weaponry that doesn't have disadvantage, and having the ability to have a swim speed and breathe underwater is really essential for defeating these threats. Because if you don't have them, you're at a real disadvantage.
So we're going to take a look at all of the classes. We're going to look at either the themes that you can bring to life in a seafaring adventure, or specifically whether or not the class has any options to get a swim speed or be better at water-based adventures or breathing underwater. So let's kick things off with the Artificer. I think the Artificer for themes here, you are going to be looking at being the ship mechanic, the one who's repairing the cannons, making sure the muskets are ready to go. They do have, though, one option that might help out.
And that is the Replicate Magic item, Infusion, at 10th level, lets you make gloves of swimming and climbing. Unfortunately, these gloves are a little deceptive. They don't actually give you a swim speed or a climb speed under the 5th edition rules. They just give you a +5 bonus to swim or climb.
So the Artificer's not going to be at a total loss, but they're also not the best here. I do think that when we move on to the Barbarian, you can easily draw inspiration from Viking sea raiders, or a lot of pirate ships always have that classic bruiser, the big brute guy who's just intimidating. So I do think that your Barbarian fits very well, whether you're doing Viking or pirate themes.
Yeah. Now, Barbarians actually do have two ways to get themselves swim speeds through subclasses. The Storm Herald Barbarian and the Path of the Beast Barbarian both have ways to give the Barbarian a swim speed starting at level 6. I think the Storm Herald also works great as sort of like a Viking warrior infused with the magic of Thor.
Yeah.
That is going to go out there and take the high seas. So I think that fits perfectly. The Path of the Beast, I almost imagine this, I'm going to really pull this weird reference. The Path of the Beast Barbarian could be your mutant from the Waterworld film.
Yeah. Yeah, Waterworld. What a great movie. It's, well, okay, you know what? I think I should watch Waterworld again. I wonder if it's so bad that it's good yet.
I somehow don't think that's the case. And you know what? I really respect Kevin Costner's career.
Yeah, he has a great career, including Waterworld. 2 thumbs up, 5 stars. Watch it. Now, sticking to the Viking theme, I think that when we come to the Bard, you could be the Viking Skald, or you could just be the ship's minstrel or entertainer, which was a common thing that you see in a lot of pirate-themed ideas.
And I guess you can inspire your party while you're drowning underwater, but you don't have any options beyond your spells for giving yourself water breathing or any form of swim speeds.
Now, if you move on to the Cleric, again, they don't have a lot for getting swim speeds or breathing underwater. They're probably wearing heavy armor and drowning very quickly, but you do have the Tempest Domain Cleric, which I think is so on theme, on brand for the seafaring adventure. You do also have the Nature Domain, which could work as well. So you have theme here. You're just don't fall over the ship's railing and drown.
Now, the Druid also continues the Viking vibes. And with the Druid, whether you are a Circle of the Moon Druid or not, all Druids have swim speed unlocked for Wild Shape starting at level 4. So any druid is going to be able to turn into a fish and swim around. It's just that the moon druids are going to be able to turn into dangerous things like sharks and whales.
Yeah. So if you're a regular druid, you can turn into a little octopus to fight the Kraken, tentacle on tentacle.
Yep.
Now, as we come to the fighter, fighters are just going to drown. They got nothing. They got nothing going here.
No.
Fighters make an excellent pirate. They're just the pirate who didn't learn how to swim. You're probably going to want to ditch the heavy armor and probably go with more of a dex-based fighter build so that you actually have a chance to doggy paddle your way to safety.
And monks are kind of in the same boat, despite
Same boat.
Yeah. And despite having lots of mobility options, lots of things for climb speed and whatnot, and the ability to temporarily run on water, which I guess is useful from getting ship to ship, monks don't have a swim speed. or any way to get one. Although I love the idea of being a drunken master monk on a pirate crew.
I think the Drunken Master is right on here, and it's not all about swim speeds and surviving water, so I actually think the ability to run on water and their mobility to, like, run up the mast of a ship, monks have more going than fighters.
I think they definitely do, but it still is, like, if you are knocked overboard.
If the Kraken grabs them and drags them under, oh no. Paladins, maybe not by the official rules, but Oath of the Open Sea, which is a critical role content creation, that will fit on brand. And also, most paladins get their ability to summon a steed. That steed can be a mount with a swim speed. So I really like to picture the Triton paladin riding a giant seahorse.
Yeah, and in a similar vein, Rangers, Beastmaster Rangers in particular, have an amazing opportunity here to have an aquatic animal companion, and I think fit right in with the pirate survivalist theme. And notably, the roving optional class feature from Tasha's grants all Rangers climb and swim speeds starting at level 6. So if you want to be a Gloomstalker Ranger fighting on the high seas, you're going to be just fine with your swim speed. Definitely go with that crossbow specialization, because you're still going to, if you want to do the ranged-based Ranger, the longbow is not going to be your friend when you're underwater.
With the Rogue, still not the best for swimming. But we do have the Swashbuckler, and even though the Swashbuckler has not a single ability that says, hey, this guy's a pirate or belongs on a ship, the Swashbuckler still is an iconic theme for a pirate ship, and I think could make an excellent captain or first mate. I just like, every ship needs a Swashbuckler.
The Storm Sorcerer is a natural fit for an aquatic campaign. They've got lots of lightning and storm-based magic, and the flight will help keep you out of the water, but you're not going to be breathe underwater or swim. Oddly enough, the Aberrant Mind Sorcerer at level 14 can spend sorcery points to give themselves a swim speed by mutating their form.
They're a little behind everybody else.
Yeah, that's late. It's very late to get a swim speed. But I mean, I guess, Kraken is a high challenge rating monster, so there you go.
For warlocks, I think the Fathomless Warlock is the iconic choice here. And now you worship the Kraken. And they get a swim speed at first level, which means any class could take a 1-level dip in Warlock and choose Fathomless and get a swim speed. You also have the Gift of the Depths Invocation, which is at level 5 and grants you a swim speed as well.
It's important to note that because this Gift of the Depths Invocation has a level requirement, you can't snag it with Eldritch Adept as any other class. So it would be one of our few feat hacks to get the swim speed, but it ain't.
For the wizard, you're really down to your spell list. Luckily, they do have a good arsenal of spells that can help out here, but they can't naturally be good at swimming. I will say, though, one of my favorite things, if you're trying to think, how does a wizard fit on a pirate ship? I ran a pirate campaign as my first ever campaign, and Monty played a wizard with a bandolier of shells that were all your spells, your spell shells. And you loaded them into a big pistol that was your wand, and you shot the spells out.
Yeah,
so,
and I love that character.
Yeah, you can make any character pirate themed if you try hard enough with a little bit of reflavoring.
Now, as you can no doubt guess, there's not a lot of ways to get a swim speed from your class, unless you are very fortunate and are a druid or a ranger. You either have to take a very specific subclass, or take a very specific invocation. So one of the best ways to actually get the swim speed and the underwater breathing, if you want it to be passive and always on, is to play an aquatic species.
Now, there's a few key options here. You have your sea elves, you have your Triton,
your water genocide.
Yeah, and also, though, you could go a little bit of a different direction and play like a Seagull Aarakocra and get a flying speed. Doesn't help you swimming, but if you're flying around, you're less likely to have to deal with the water.
Until something knocks you prone, or the long reach on those Kraken tentacles pull you underwater.
Well, that's why you just need to take the right feats. How was that transition?
Well, unfortunately, again, there's no actual feat that will give you a swim speed or directly, passively, the ability to breathe underwater. But there's still a few feats that we think might be kind of useful in a nautical campaign that we don't normally spotlight. So here's a few ones that we thought might be worth considering.
Obviously, take all of your favorite feats that we talk about in every single video ever, but ones that you probably...
Polearm Master.
Yeah, take Polearm Master.
Sharpshooter.
Take your Sharpshooter. Take
Lucky.
your Great Weapon Master.
You got to be a lucky pirate.
I mean, yeah.
Okay, so now
that's out of the way.
Yeah, now that that's out of the way.
So some feats that you usually wouldn't consider that might really help for a ship or a seafaring campaign. Athlete. Athlete helps you out with climbing. That gives you a climb speed as well as allowing you to keep your footing on your rocky boat. It's those little things, but if you're going to be climbing up the mast to look out, or, swinging off of ropes and all of that, Athlete could get you there.
I think that nautical campaigns, particularly pirate campaigns, often go together with black powder weaponry. Pretty much it's like the perfect match. It's like, it almost feels like something is missing from this. Right? Like, I don't know. What is
Guns are to pirates as something is to some peanut butter is to jelly.
I feel like if you don't have guns in your pirate campaign, it's like you made me a hamburger without cheese on it.
It's like, still okay, but it's not okay, but
like
good.
I kind of expected there to be cheese. Like I've had burgers that don't have cheese on them that are pretty good, and like that's where I think the Viking nautical campaign is a cool, like, oh, here's your nautical campaign without cheese.
Yeah.
Right. But I think most people, when they think nautical campaign, they think pirates, and when they think pirates, they think pistols, hoisting the black flag, slitting throats, all that good stuff. Gun our feet, take it.
Now, if you are playing the ship captain, maybe you're a swashbuckler, or maybe you're the Viking skald or the minstrel on the ship, inspiring leader might be an excellent choice for either the minstrel or the captain, both of which want to inspire the crew and get them ready for their next adventure.
Now, although there isn't a direct way to get water breathing or swim speeds, you can take Ritual Caster and thus get the water breathing spell, which is a ritual. So if no one in your party can just cast water breathing as a ritual, then take Ritual Caster so that you have water breathing.
Now, a feat that nobody really ever takes, but might work if you are in a nautical campaign, is Keen Mind. Keen Mind allows you to always know which way is north, always know how many hours are left in a day, and classic pirates and ship captains used to use the stars to navigate and line up the constellations to know what direction they were heading. And if you are playing in a campaign where the DM plans on navigation being a key part of it, Keen Mind actually might save you and your whole crew's lives.
Now, moving along to spells, as we've mentioned multiple times in this episode, water breathing is probably essential, even though the breathing underwater rules are very, very generous. It is a ritual spell. It lasts for 8 hours. It targets multiple characters. It's available to so many different classes anyways. It's very easy to get access to. On the other hand, spells that grant a swim speed are actually really rare and very tricky, the few that do exist. Water Walk lets you walk on water and it will float you back up to the surface, but it doesn't actually help you if you need to do something underwater. This is where your only real options are Alter Self and Polymorph, both of which are not ideal. Alter Self only works on yourself and it requires concentration. Polymorph works on other people. It's cool to turn them into a giant shark or a crocodile or a killer whale, but then they're going to lose all their other class features, and you also still have to concentrate on the polymorph. So it's a bit of a trade-off when it comes to spells here.
Now, the survival spells aside, there are also a lot of spells that can help out with just handling a water-themed campaign or dealing with combat. You have a lot of spells like Shape Water, Wall of Water, or if you're going more the storm color route, you could Call Lightning or Tidal Wave.
I really like spells like Control Water, Watery Sphere, but also Gust of Wind. I've always had a soft spot for the solving the problem of the ship running out of wind by using the Gust of Wind spell to propel the ship forward, or in some kind of creative way like that. So I think that packing these can be a lot of fun.
At higher levels, you get access to Storm Sphere, Tsunami, and Storm of Vengeance. But I also think another thing that a lot of people don't consider is, again, depending on the type of campaign you're running, Pirates had to deal with scurvy a lot because there wasn't a lot of good food to eat. They're dealing with seawater, so
Lack of vitamin C.
lack of vitamin C on the open sea. Who would have thought? But also, yeah, salt water isn't good for drinking. So you could be dealing with starvation or thirst on a boat. So actually packing spells like Goodberry or Hero's Feast or Create or Destroy Water could have major impacts on surviving a seafaring campaign.
So with our class abilities, feats, and species, and all those good things and spells considered, let's go to magic items and equipment. Because I actually think that this can be a very relevant part of a underwater campaign.
Now, first and foremost, we talked earlier about some of the rules that you need to keep in mind, which means that your characters, if they can do this, might want to lean towards light or medium armor and dexterity base so that they're better at navigating the ship or jumping into the water or doing what they need to. They're also probably going to want to have everybody on the ship equipped with either daggers, short swords, spears, tridents, and everybody's going to want a crossbow. No bows allowed on the open sea. They're not going to do you any favors. Crossbows all around, and you might even want a good supply of nets and javelins that people can grab on the go if they need to hop off the ship for any reason.
Now, when it comes to magic items, you may want to stock up on a couple emergency potions of water breathing. But again, the swimming is where the magic items really shine. Because the Ring of Swimming grants you a 40-foot movement speed. It's an uncommon magic item, and no attunement is necessary. This is probably one of the more accessible ways of just having your bases covered when it comes to the swim speed, because you can add it into any of your equipment. Just conveniently goes on the finger.
I think one of the best options in the game, though, is going to be the Cloak of the Manta Ray, which also doesn't require attunement. It gives you a 60-foot swim speed and water breathing. So you have a cloak that makes you into a manta ray.
Makes sense. Yep. On the other hand, the magic item that is actually really bad is the Cap of Water Breathing. It doesn't require attunement, but it also doesn't give you a swim speed. And annoyingly, you have to speak a command word to activate the bubble, which pops up above your head to provide the air that you breathe, and it has to be spoken when you're underwater, and it pops when you become out of water. So if you're ever in a scenario where you're going underwater and into water, underwater or into the water, perhaps you have a Kraken that constantly is pulling you back underwater, or you're fighting in that ship-to-ship environment, the Cap of Water Breathing is not the way you want to go. Get the Cloak of the Manta Ray. And all these are uncommon items. So assuming that they're all equally accessible to your characters, I think get the Cloak of the Manta Ray if you can get it. Get more than one if you can. Everyone in that Manta Ray style, or rings of the rings of swimming.
I do think that if you are a character who wants to wear heavy armor, you're going to want to seek out the Mariner's Armor, which basically is a life jacket. If you are knocked unconscious underwater, you're just going to float to the surface, and you get a swim speed equal to your walking speed. So if you're that heavy armored cleric, try to find Mariner's Armor.
As a DM, I'll give out the Mariner's Armor, I'll give out the Ring of Swimming and the Cloak of the Manta Ray. And I'll give out a Cap of Water Breathing just so that the party realizes how much it sucks and they don't use it. And then, most of my groups are 3 people or 4 people. So usually beyond that, there's one other player that has got their own option covered for a swim speed somehow, or doesn't want to get into the water at all.
So with all of those in mind, you should now be well prepared to set out and survive a seafaring adventure on the open waters, taking on all the dangers of the deep, including the dreaded Kraken, which is probably going to be our big bad of this campaign. Luckily, we can just undo the Kraken with a simple banishment spell.
Yeah, the Kraken doesn't have legendary resistance, and if you hit it with banishment, it's just gone, and now you got a minute to get away from it.
But if you want to know more about how to upgrade your Kraken, Trient Monk is doing a video on making the Kraken more deadly. And you're going to want to stay tuned because Kraken Week is in full swing, and there are a ton of content creators creating amazing content to help you out with either making the Kraken more deadly, doing cool things with water-based adventures, or other tips and tricks and homebrews to add to your seafaring campaigns. So we have had a lot of fun talking to the other creators and building this community around Kraken Week, and it's really exciting. We're hoping to continue this in years to come and invite more creators to join in on the fun of Kraken Week.
And another big thank you to all of our amazing Patreon supporters for making everything that we do on this channel possible. If you enjoy the work that we do here on the channel, please consider joining our community by following the links right down below.
And if you want to see us struggling with water-based combat from time to time, you can check out our actual play in the Worlds of Drakenheim, which airs Tuesday evenings right here on YouTube. You can find all the previous episodes right up over here.
And we've got plenty more tips and tricks for players in 5th edition right up over here.
Please subscribe to our channel, like this video, and ring that bell so that you never miss an episode.
Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time
In the dungeon.